He found that it wasn't as easy as he thought it might be, and soon he became very discouraged because things were not going well.
It happened in Columbus, Ohio. I came to the realization I just didn't have the promotional ability, neither did I the financial backing to make this business go. And I decided I'd go back to Lima and find another job.
This was a very disappointing time for Stanley. He knew his heritage all too well.
I think he saw his father fail, and he didn't want to fail.
He came from a long line of men with great ideas, but poor success.
My dad, he tried a lot of different things, but never succeeded.
His father and grandfather tried many things. They chased one venture all the way to San Francisco, California. While they were there, on September 15th, 1915, Stanley Tam was born.
The doctor came in and said, we've got to make out a birth certificate. What's the child's name? And my dad, he wanted the name Stanford, but my mother wanted Stanley. And they couldn't compromise. And so my mother said to the doctor, oh, just put down John Doe. And so the doctor did. And my father had to go down later on and pay to have my name changed.
After realizing that the silver business wasn't working, he wondered if he was destined to be a John Doe for the rest of his life.
But there is something humble about people that know God. The realism that comes to them lets them evaluate themselves adequately.
And I packed all my belongings in my car, and I started for home. I remember it was evening.
As he was driving home, he began to talk to God. He had recently become a Christian.
And I was praying to God about this disappointment, when all at once God spoke to my heart. Stanley, it doesn't need to be a disappointment. You don't need to go broke in this business. Turn it over to me. I'll make it succeed.
If they know what they can't do, they know where they need God, and they know what God can do, and so you get the two together. It's an amazing combination.
I made a covenant with God. I said, God, if you will make this business succeed, I will honor you in every way I possibly can.
With that, he came back home and asked his dad to stake him in business again.
He went through his pockets and pulled out $12. He said, this is all I have, but you can have it.
Along with 25 that he had left, to start over again. And he did. Same process, same business. The only difference now was there's a different purpose. The purpose was to honor God in any way that he possibly could, rather than get personally rich.
And then when you get people that know God, there's a creativity about them. They can think outside the box, because all the time they're thinking not just about the human possibilities here, or the material, financial possibilities. They're always thinking about that possible extra thing that can be added, that God can add, and so they can dare to think bigger thoughts than the other people.
It was a game. It was a challenge to him to grow the company, to make sales, to see the bottom line grow.
Stanley was a very good businessman, and he was very interested in productivity and efficiency.
I'd take a map and I'd mark every town at 5,000. It took 5,000 people to support a photographer. And then I would zigzag all these cities until I covered everyone in the state.
He had stick-to-itiveness. He persisted, and he made it work.
Eventually, business began to take off, and he had silver collectors in over 30 states.
That's an inspiration to me, to not give up when you encounter hurdles that seem to be insurmountable.
God was working in Stanley's life in more ways than just the business. One day, as Stanley was working his way back from Wisconsin, he decided to stop in Rockford, Illinois to attend church. After church, he was invited to dinner.
We sat across from each other at a dinner for the young people.
and across the table sat a beautiful girl. I got interested in her. Then I discovered she had a boyfriend. That spoiled it all.
I was going with a fellow from Minnesota at that time. I had a lot of boyfriends, and I knew all the Swedish boys, but they're not like Stanley. Stanley had the real thing.
But 1 year later, I come back to Rockford, Illinois. And my friend, he said, my girlfriend and I were going to a school play tonight. We think we got a date for you.
And that night, I went over to my girlfriend's house and I said, Lord, send somebody along that loves the Lord with all of his heart, somebody that's good looking and somebody that's different. The doorbell rang, they said, is Juanita here? And they said, well, we got a date for you. And I said, I was so sick of boys. And I said, who is it? And they said, it's Stanley Tam. I said, I'll be right out. Because that was the year before I sat across the table and I was no longer going with this fella in Minnesota.
She lived 320 miles from Lima. I thought, what's the use of just writing?
3 cents it cost then, but you can't get much love for 3 cents.
I said, will you marry me? She said, yes, I will.
We were engaged in 3 months and married in 8.
They were married in Rockford on January 21st, 1939. From there, they left on their unusual honeymoon business trip.
We pulled away in our new little house trailer.
We couldn't travel unless I sold, you know. So my wife, she was on honeymoon. I was selling.
We just kept going, and we were gone for 6 weeks. We went as far as Corpus Christi, Texas.
Then we came back to Houston, and we worked that town. Then we went up to Austin, Waco, Dallas.
Finally, he took me home.
I said, honey, how would you like to spend a couple weeks with your family?
And I'd never been away from home that long.
Oh, she said, I'd sure like that. And I said to myself, I sure like that too.
Stanley and his new bride moved to Lima, Ohio to settle down. The Lord continued to prosper the business, and they were able to move from their house trailer into their first apartment. It was then that they ran into their first snag.
Silver was 45 cents an ounce at this time. And then we read the paper that silver had dropped to 35 cents an ounce. I said, honey, I don't think we can stay on the road and pick up these silver collectors and sell them for 35 cents. We better get another job, and we'll do this on the side.
My mother was very supportive of whatever my dad did.
She was very capable in so many areas.
It was a team, the two of them.
Juanita suggested an idea that would change the course of the entire company.
My wife said, why don't you write a letter to all your customers and tell them that we can't come and pick them up. They'll have to mail them in. Maybe it'd work out that we could run a mail order business.
He began to send these silver collectors through the mail. They would go out to a photographer or to an X-ray department. When it got loaded with silver, they would wrap it up and mail it back to him, and he'd send them out another new collector.
So many came in that we made more money working the silver collectors by direct mail than we would have if we traveled on the road.